Welcome to Inspiring Possible. I'm Christy Pennison, former stuck person turned therapist and dream consultant. Are you feeling stuck, overwhelmed, uncertain, or just need a little inspiration? Then I want to help you gain the clarity, confidence, and courage to create possibilities and live a life you love. Because folks, life's too short to be miserable. Welcome back, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning in and listening to another episode. You know, honestly, it's because people like you that keeps this podcast going, the dream alive, the motivation alive, to hopefully help bring you some valuable insights, things to help you rethink life in general, and also just help you move through when life maybe isn't always as predictable or whatever as we would like. Because you all know, y'all probably got up this morning, if it's morning time or later today, and something went down that you did not expect to happen, but you're still showing up and you're pushing through. And I am very thankful that you are with us again. And so if you have ever found yourself in a place where maybe you didn't fit the mold of what that role maybe that you were in or that position you were in typically looked like. Maybe you were in a place where you found yourself feeling like, am I really supposed to be here? Or questioning whether or not you should be in a role or a position or even in a relationship that you maybe later on are second guessing yourself about. And not because that you're not supposed to be there, but just because you're questioning your self-worth or your self-identity or whatever it is. Well, if that's you, if you resonate with that, then please stick around because I have a special guest today who is going to be talking about a little bit about this. And she actually wrote a book about it. She is the author of Is This Seat for Me? And that is Sheila Buswell. So welcome, Sheila, to the podcast.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Sheila, tell me a little bit about what's led you to write this book.
I started the business in April of 2019, and I have a master's in engineering, but this is the first time I ever headed up a company. And I think you had your previous guest, Allison Hall. She talks about having a plan, and I had a plan and everything, but I didn't anticipate that people would, okay, if I ask questions about business to further, because I don't have any education in that, to further my understanding, that it would be diagnosed, I'm using air quotes, as imposter syndrome. And after 20 years of being told, being in a male dominated field and not looking like the people who traditionally held those roles and proving my point or proving that I belong there, it infuriated me. And I was in a business that is developing a device that used machine learning, artificial intelligence, and I was in a field that was new. And I should have, I had self-doubt about that. I needed to learn more. And it was a challenge. I didn't want that challenge on top of the other challenges. I did have imposter syndrome. I've learned that after researching for the book. The book has other stories of other humans that I have met that have imposter syndrome and I offer 5 personal solutions that I have employed and others have employed to simply situationally get through those situations where most people, if not all people, deal with it, and 2 cultural solutions that I think will make it better.
Yeah, well, and I'm sure if somebody is listening right now, which I mean, y'all are listening right now, right? Okay. And you're listening to this episode, I mean, I think most people, I'm not going to say everybody, because there might be somebody that's bionic out there, right? Has maybe at one point in their life felt that maybe in a role they were trying to do or something that they were trying to accomplish, they maybe didn't feel 100% confident in it and maybe thinking to themselves, if people only knew, then maybe XYZ. Or like you said, they get themselves in a role and the way that other people are responding to them makes them question, whether or not they actually have the skills or talents or abilities to do that. So what are the things that you found? I know you said there were like some strategies that you found that not only helped you, but that also that you have then heard other people employ to kind of help them move through, feeling like that?
I really have used number one the most, and that was just remembering your past achievements. And that's anything, right? Building on anything, whether it's hitting a home run in T-ball. For me, using a sports ball analogy is crazy, but that's the one I've employed the most. That's the one of five. The second one is don't compare yourself to others. I totally used to compare myself to others, but that was before social media. And now you don't compare your reality to another reality. You compare your reality to somebody's highlight reel, and that's just not practical.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that a little bit because I feel like a lot of people do get stuck in the comparison trap, especially if they are doing something new, or maybe they're trying to build a business, or maybe they're trying to make a change in their life. And it seems so easy for this other person who's made this change, but you're still over here on the struggle bus, or they seem to be really doing good, maybe in the business or hobby or whatever it is that they're doing. And you're still feeling like, well, they figured it out. I obviously must not know what it is that I'm doing over here. So, how do you help people? Or in the book, what was some of the references that you kind of help people to help get out of that comparison trap?
It's hard because it's situational, right? Like it's just to be mindful, and that's be mindful of your thinking is one of the things, but like be aware that, okay, if you compare yourself to others, you don't really know what's going on. Just because somebody posts a picture of them on Instagram or the internet machine, you don't know that that's the reality. And just to be aware that you don't know that that's really what they're doing. And just because, and I'm going to date myself here, you see Michael Jordan making a shot every time, it doesn't show the hours of practice and the times that he missed and the teams he was cut from. But the grit that it took to stay with it and do it isn't shown in all those pictures. But, you might still have that in you. You just don't see it in all those
Yeah,
pictures.
there was this quote I heard one time, and I'm probably going to not do it justice and misquote it, whatever. But it was kind of it was about like overnight success. And it was like, when you see somebody's overnight success, like you missed the 10 years, overnight was actually 10 years in the making. It really wasn't overnight. And I think about that too, whenever you're talking about Michael Jordan, like all the shots he missed, nobody saw that, right? I mean, if he was really following, you might have been looking at the shots he missed, but he's more known for the shots he actually made, right? And the success that he had. And so I think it's so hard. Like you said, we used to compare each other to others' reality. And I grew up in the verge right before social media and the internet became a thing. And then when I transitioned to adult life, it was kind of starting to gain traction. But I just think that it's so much harder to not focus on your path, your journey, whenever you're just sometimes mindlessly scrolling or checking in to see what other people are doing. And then you're like, oh, I must be so far behind. But the reality is, it's somebody's highlight reel. It's not always the true story of what's really going on behind the scenes in their life.
People pick and choose what to post. Even people who are older than me, they can put so many filters on the pictures they post on social. Like I'm pushing 50, somebody who's older than me. If you look great, great. If you have filters, all the filters in the world, more power to you. But I don't want to compare. Just because I have crow's feet doesn't mean she doesn't have crow's feet in reality, but she doesn't have them on the interwebs. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah. It's so true. And sometimes we can get caught comparing ourselves to something that is kind of like we're talking about, not real. It's not a real thing. And so we can really get stuck sometimes at that. So okay, so one of the things is to celebrate your accomplishments, and another one is try to avoid the comparison trap if at all possible, or at least be mindful when you find yourself comparing yourself to other people. What are some other things that you've found?
practicing self grace. And this sounds so easy to say, but it is so hard to do. Like there are things you just making mistakes is natural. Understanding how to fix them so you don't make them again, but don't wallow in your mistakes. And I think that that's, and say, okay, oops, I jacked up this thing and, I'll move on from that. But moving on is a huge thing. And I think God, I'm going to mess up. Alice, I think it was Allison Hall who said that too about she liked Dora, or was it you that liked Dora
To me,
from
Dora, yeah, I love me some Dora.
I like Finding Nemo too, but it's just like she's like,
Mm.
just keep swimming, just keep swimming. Oh, yeah, that's the wrong way, but go the right way next time. You know what I mean? Like that attitude is
Yeah, it
awesome.
is, and it is something that I think kind of as we're talking, what you're saying is reminding me that it is an attitude you have to cultivate over time to give yourself that grace because I found that sometimes people can be the harshest critics of themselves. And they're actually criticizing themselves or they're internalizing their mistakes a lot more harshly than maybe someone else is. And so trying to find ways to acknowledge when you are kind of being really hard on yourself. And it doesn't mean that you can't say, I'm really disappointed that this went this way, or I made this mistake and I'm going to take ownership for it. And I didn't like the way that it made me feel, or I didn't like that I felt that I didn't get to do this thing that I really wanted to do or that it worked out. But acknowledging that and then just reminding yourself that you're human. Okay. And I don't know about you, Sheila, but have you met a perfect human yet in real life that had never made a mistake? Have you met anybody like that along your journey?
No, I haven't. And they would, if I had, I wouldn't want to be their friend. Like, because how boring would that
Yeah.
be? Give me the flaws all day long,
I
right?
need somebody who gets it. Okay. I need somebody who gets it. And that's so true because I think a lot of times people that I've even been intimidated by, right? We're going to talk about this imposter syndrome that I'm like, oh my gosh, if I met that person in real life, then they've made it this far. I can't imagine myself meeting them. And the more that I've put myself in those uncomfortable situations where I've met people that I've really admired and respected and looked up to, and maybe because they were somebody who spoke on different topics I was interested in, or an author that I love to read, or a podcaster I love to listen to. What I found is that these are people too, so, they're not perfect. And if they are claiming to be perfect, I don't want to be listening to them anyways. So it is really true that the fact is that we all have things that we're going to do that we're going to mess up. We're going to mess it up. And some mess ups are going to be bigger than other mess ups, but it's how do you give yourself grace to learn as you're going on the journey, is what I'm hearing you say, so that you can confidently be able to go forward and move through. Or, like Dory said, keep swimming.
I do think that's very philosophical. I know it's a Pixar movie, but I just think the idea of keep moving forward is just huge. And I do think that, like, I think you get into this mentality, and it's not that you can't be defeated if you keep going, right? You get defeated if you just stop and stay down, right? Like,
Yeah.
I cannot believe how many boxing quotes I'm throwing out, but like, you can't beat the guy who keeps getting up, right? You knock out the guy, he stays down. That you win. The other guy wins. I hate
Yeah.
boxing. I can't even watch it. But
Well, there's
like
some
the
truths here.
idea,
There's some truths that can be found in this sport. Get
yeah,
back up.
yep. So after self grace, it's very, we mentioned this, I mentioned this before, be mindful of your thinking. And I think that that's comparing yourself to others is very intertwined, because you just got to be aware when you compare yourself to others that that's in your brain. You only know this two-dimensional, I don't know if it's two-dimensional, but this image that people portray. You don't know the depth. You don't know what's going on. And be mindful of that. And I think it's also mindful if you get in this negative spiral of like, I got this makeup brush and I didn't know what it was for. And it sent me on a negative spiral. And I was like, oh, I caught myself, but I had been practicing this for a long time. But it was like just in that sweet spot that, I wasn't aware of it, that how terrible I was talking to myself. You wouldn't talk to your friend that way, right? That monster under my bed.
Yeah, that's true, and we all have our little monsters under our bed. I like how you said that, the little monsters that come out, and sometimes you don't know when they're about to come out until it hits you, and then you're like, "Whoa." I mean, I can think about something I had last week. I had gotten really, upset and bothered by something that I got fixated on, and listen, I've, like, learned to identify my monsters, but they will still creep up, I tell you, at the most inopportune times. And this little monster came up, and I remember I had to really fight that, be mindful of my thinking, but had to fight it back to say, like, to give myself the assumption that maybe it wasn't as terrible as I'm making it out in my head, right? Like, maybe I can assume the best about this situation versus assuming the worst, or I can assume the best about myself than assuming the worst. And I think a lot of times it's just being, like you said, mindful of what you're thinking and helping steer it sometimes in a different direction. Has there been anything that you found that is very helpful for you to steer some of these little monsters in a different direction from not overtaking you?
Biggest thing that attacks me is when I don't look, and I think this is most people, when I don't look like the thing that's always traditionally held this role or to the left or right of me. I feel like I'm not enough to fill that role. And I'm like, well, who says that you need to be like all women have the 10,000 hours to be proficient in makeup? And who says that, all CEOs need to be this and that? And like, who says? Like, I talk to myself like that. And I step through what I have done previously. And this is where I build on a lot of the remembering my past achievements. And I'm like, okay, I was in the military. So I think about how hard basic training was. I deployed to Bosnia. How hard was that? Field rotations, like things that are seemingly not related, but I build up my confidence where it can be eroded by those little monsters. I think imposter syndrome or like self doubt can be like self confidence vampires that can suck it out of you. And I give myself pep talks. Like, I've done this before. Comparatively, this is easy. So I don't know if that's going to help everybody, but that's what I do.
Yeah, and I did think it does. I mean, and you have to find, like we're talking about, and I hopefully people, if you're listening, you've gotten a lot of different perspectives from different guests that we've had on how to challenge some of this thinking that can really overwhelm, defeat, or limit you from going for the things that you want to go for in your life, to the changes that you want to make in your life. And I think it is trying to figure out what is going to work for you. I have learned for me that sometimes I have to go to sleep. Now, for some people, they're going to hyperfixate on it and they're going to not be able to sleep because they're going to be dwelling over and over on this thing that's kept them stuck. But for me, I can typically still go to sleep. And that works for me because in the morning I wake up and I'm like, it may still be in the back of my mind, but it's not yelling at me. It's like not right there in front of my face like it might have been the night before. And so I know for me that are getting out and doing some movement or just reminding myself, Christy, that's the worst case scenario monster. That's not the reality monster over here. And just being able to kind of talk through that. But I think, like you said, that's what works for you. And I think people have to figure out what's going to actually work from them, because what I've learned and experienced is that people are so diverse and unique. I mean, we walk around, we all look different. There's not one of us that's going to be as far as I know, unless they get really good at like some kind of cloning situation thing. There's one of you. So that means that you are unique. And I found that people's mindsets are unique. The way that their brain processes things are very unique. I'm sure as you've done engineering and engineering devices that will help people, each person's recovery path is unique. Whatever it is, it's very unique. And so finding what's going to work for you to silence them voices is very important. Would you agree, Sheila?
I would totally agree. And my husband, we're the same Myers Briggs personality. We're both engineers, but we look at the world very differently. And what would work for him would not work for me. So there's that. As much stereotypically can be the same, can be two people who look the same can be very, very different. That there's no one size fits all solution.
Yeah, at least that I haven't found. I'm sure if we found it, then, we'd be out of being able to talk about this stuff, right, Sheila?
Yep.
So, okay, was there any other things? I know that there was also like maybe some other strategies that you had that you were mentioning.
This is one that is really powerful, and I got it from my grandmother. And I've used it for the longest. The first one I used it the most, but this one I've used the longest, and it's will it matter in a year? Somebody cuts you off in traffic, it makes you really mad in that instance, but after a few breaths, doesn't matter anymore. But there has been times in my life that it didn't make me mad, but I realized later that it was really important. And the first time I remember my grandma saying this, I was in third grade. And, in a year, she said, the first time she said it to me, she was right. In a year, it didn't matter. But there are times when I'm not the most articulate. I think when somebody said something that did matter, I knew it needed to be shut down and I didn't have the word. So I just said kittens are furry or some ridiculous thing. But I was like, okay, it will matter in a year. I need to shut it down right now. But I didn't have the words or
Yeah, the ability to confront the situation or just face it or, confront it head on to stop it. Yeah.
and that's it. Those are the
What
five.
did you say that you said? Kids are free?
Kittens are furry. Yeah.
Kittens are free.
Kittens are furry. Yeah. I'm sorry. I'm
Or
not close to
furry, not free.
some kittens are
I
free.
like it. Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of kittens, unfortunately, where
I'm
I
not
live
even a
that
cat person.
are
I don't know why
free.
that popped in my head, but that was the first thing that came in my head. And I just said it
Yeah,
out loud.
well, I love it though. Sometimes it's using and this is a great, I think, actually strategy. If we're talking about trying to figure out a strategy that works for you to confront sometimes these limiting beliefs or imposter syndrome or self-doubt, is using humor to disarm your inner critic, I think is super important. And when you don't know the words, just making up something that's like so left field will help disarm you and it'll help distract you. So me, I don't know if you have this issue, but I'm gonna tell you something about how my brain works. My mind oftentimes does not always say the word how I want to get it out. So in my brain, it moves so fast, my mind moves so fast that sometimes I want to say something and I will say the complete opposite, or I will use a word that will not make a lick of sense in the context of the sentence that I'm saying. And I've learned to just kind of use humor to disarm the, I guess, criticalness of self to say, well, that's just how my brain's working today. Or I don't even remember what I was trying to say, like to disarm that. And so I think the kittens are furry. It's just kind of one of those random statements that can really disarm. And it can also use humor to diffuse some of that self criticalness.
Yeah, I think humor is the best way to approach any of it. If you don't take yourself too seriously, it's the best way to muddle through this thing called life, right? Like
Yeah.
Dory
Yeah.
kept swimming because she didn't take any of
Yeah.
it.
And she also had some short term memory loss, which I can very well So you're right. Sometimes it's just like, hey, reminding yourself that, like, hey, most of the things, like you said, will it matter in a year? That kind of goes back to like, I'm thinking about Dory and her short term memory loss, but, sometimes things won't matter. People are going to move on. They are going to forget. I'm not saying that they won't forget everything because some people have some really ironclad memories out there and they will remember everything you did that was not correct. But most of the time, people move on.
Yep.
They move through life. They're more inward than they are outward. And so if you're giving yourself that grace as well to say like, listen, I may have thought this thing was the hugest mistake I ever did make, or I maybe did not present myself in the way that I should have, or I really had that foot in the mouth moment that I was like wondering where my foot was and why didn't I shove it in my mouth right just then. But the reality is most people, they ain't gonna remember what you said unless you deeply offended them, and then it'll be okay. Because guess what? None of us getting out of here anyways, So, so it's just some things that I start to think about when I'm thinking about trying to figure out as we're talking about this to combat this thing that sometimes comes up, and it is our experiences that sometimes cast some doubt on us being able to show up fully as ourselves for the goals that we have. So, as you were kind of building this business, I know you said there were like maybe two kind of cultural things of how I don't know if it's how you implemented or what are those things that you found that really helped you ingrain recognizing that hey, this seat is for me. I can pull up to the seat and I can sit down in it.
So the cultural solutions I talk about specifically are like defining the culture up front. Like when you go for a job interview, they're usually pretty vague when they just divide. Like I've helped in the companies I've worked for a lot of great companies, but like describe a role and it's really vague, but just be more precise. And then I think Nicole Valence, I think you had her, and she talked about leading and meeting with people every week. And I think like she talks about like she was in a totally different field, but I think Gary Vee talks about that. And if you meet with people every week, you know what motivates them. And the cultural solutions, like if you know, my cultural solution was simply that if the tie the company culture to the goals, and the goals to the different roles, regardless of what that role is. And then define the non-negotiables. Like I worked for a beer company, like my first job out of college, and it was expected that you drink at work, right? Like that was something you did. But if you work at a bank and you drink at work, you're going to get fired. If you have porn on your computer at most jobs, you're going to lose your job. But if you work at a place that makes porn, probably that's okay. And it's expected. But that stuff needs to be defined up ahead.
And what I'm hearing you say, and this is, I really like your analogies very, so like is almost to figuring out what the culture is for the role that you are maybe looking to move into or looking to brace, and whether it's even like for yourself, creating a business around a certain industry, product, service, right? Understanding what the cultural norms of that industry or of that role can really help you confidently move into that role or confidently distinguish that this seat is not for me.
Buswell Biomedical is my business, right? So I control how that culture is. But people on my advisory board, or there's 4 people on the team, but initially I made the mistake of they were for me, right? They had allegiance to me. They knew me as a person. Buswell Biomedical is developing the upward mobility. This device allows people in rehabilitation hospitals to conduct the activities of daily living, like toileting, independently without a healthcare worker there. As this company has been around for 5 years and we've been developing this device, it's a different set of priorities or allegiances if you want to develop a device or develop a technology because out of allegiance to me, or if you care about being in a rehab hospital and conducting toileting with somebody else there. If you want an entourage with you when you conduct the activities of daily living, great. This probably is not the company you need to work with. And whether it's somebody who takes out the trash or cleans the toilet, they need to be tied to that ultimate goal in developing that product to liberate people and healthcare workers. That was the goal for Buswell Biomedical. And the company culture is evolved around that, like the goal of developing this product that will provide freedom and safety and reduce lawsuits.
Yeah. So do you feel like that kind of, if people are able to take into account cultural expectations, that helps reduce imposter syndrome, or what do you feel like is the tie between the two?
I think if people, I think people wouldn't get so burnt out on their jobs in corporate America if they really understood their contribution, whether they're taking out the trash, cleaning the toilets, or they're the CEO or in the managerial staff. And I think if you value what other people do and you value yourself and you see how you contribute, like me, I know materials, right? By me knowing materials, I'm able to contribute to building this thing or doing this, like to the ultimate goal as defined by the role. I don't know, Stephanie, if I'm articulating that well, but in the book, when I talk about the cultural solutions, what I'm specifically talking about is tying the culture and accountability to producing what the company does, whatever that is, and being able to articulate that. I think that makes a better manager. And I think if you are valuing yourself and how you contribute to the ultimate goal, you're going to have the imposter syndrome less. But I think that's
Yeah.
day to day, you're going to have like that monster is going to creep up in different
Well, and
ways.
that is true. I think role alignment is like alignment for even yourself and alignment with what the role expectations are. That can decrease imposter syndrome. And what I'm hearing is almost like role and culture alignment as well to kind of be able to reduce that feeling of, I'm contributing. I don't necessarily have to be confident in everything that I'm doing, but I know that I am fulfilling a role, and I know that this culture values that role.
Yes.
Yeah. What do you think has been the biggest thing that you've learned on your journey that has really helped you get to where you are now? And this could have been the journey through in the being in the military, or it could have been, being able to start and grow this business, or it could be that, hey, this is what's helped me push through to even write this book. What do you think has been the biggest motivator for you to step out, even though you might not have always felt 100% confident in what you're doing?
I think my ability to just keep going and make decisions. I think Allison Hall talks about that too. Just, proceed and make a decision is a valuable asset too. And I think that ability to just, okay, I talk about Mike Tyson getting punched in the face and your plans. Everyone has a plan until they get punched in the face. I think I have been punched in the face a lot and keep going. And I think, like Dory, just keep swimming. I think my ability to do that has been great through COVID, through all the things. Like, materials went crazy after COVID, 2022 ish. Like, there was times when aluminum was crazy expensive. There was times when you couldn't get it. And the upward mobility is mostly made of aluminum. And it was the ability to just be like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And that was a huge punch in the face, and just be able to proceed and keep going.
Yeah, because the cost of the goods to make the equipment was highly increased is what I'm hearing you say. But even that's a challenge. And it's like, okay, I feel like I'm just been punched in the face, but I still believe in this vision. I still want to make sure that this product gets out to the people who need it. I'm passionate about this, and we're going to make it happen, is what I'm hearing you say. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, Sheila, I like to ask my guests a question that I always feel like could benefit somebody along their journey. But if you were to go back to younger you, and you can pick which age that younger version of you is, and you were to give yourself a piece of advice or a word of encouragement, what do you think that would be?
It would be to value what everybody brings to the table. Is a seat for me? You got to value what other people are bringing to the table.
Oh, I like that.
I think that helps with your own imposter syndrome. If you value what other people do, and you value, then you know what you need to bring. I spent forever thinking engineering was the most important. And I learned after starting business, engineering is important, but it's not the most important. Marketing and sales and all the business widgets are important. And engineering is just one of those widgets.
Yeah. So when you value what other people bring to the table, or the other gifts and talents of people, then it sounds like it also helps you value yourself in the process. Is that what I'm hearing you say?
Yes.
Yeah. Well, look, Sheila, if people want to get this book and they're like, you know what, y'all are speaking my language. This is something I'm struggling with. I'd love to read a book kind of that would help me, address the struggle that I sometimes feel with self-doubt or imposter syndrome. Where can they find the book Is This Seat for Me?
The book is available on Amazon and all the places. But if you go to www.istheseatforme.com and just enter in your information, you'll get a copy of the audiobook emailed to you, or a chapter in the audiobook emailed to you. So you can try it out, and then we'll start an email conversation.
Okay, awesome. Well, Sheila, I just want to acknowledge you, number one, for, sitting down in the seat. Okay. All right. Literally for, if you might have questioned at times, is this seat for me? But you say, okay, yes, I do believe this seat's for me, and that seat's for that other person over there. And we all can have a seat at this table. And then, also then going a step further to then encourage other people to move through these stuck places that they may have. So thank you for coming on the show today and for sharing these important insights that will hopefully help people along their journey. So if you are listening, I always try to give you a piece or a nugget that I'm taking from the show. And today, it really is about remembering that you have value that you can give to people. And just because you don't always feel like the seat is for you doesn't mean that it's not for you. And so if you find yourself kind of in a stuck place where you're wondering if this is where I should be, just remind yourself of all the past accomplishments that you've had, kind of like Sheila suggested. Give yourself a little bit of grace and just keep pushing forward. Until next time. That's all for today on Inspiring Possible. If you found a little inspiration today, please go on over to iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you tune in to listen to leave us a comment and rate us. Also, make sure and link up with me at inspiringpossible.com to get the free Dream It, Write It, Do It workbook. And don't forget to follow us on social media and share this with anyone who needs to be inspired. Remember, if you can believe it, it's possible.